Hi, and welcome to AFPC Insights. I'm Annie Swingen, Director for External Relations at the American Foreign Policy Council in Washington, D.C. On today's episode, I'm talking with AFPC's Central Asia-Caucasus Institute Director Svante Cornell about the changing politics in Central Asia. Hey Svante, so have you made it back safely from Sweden?
Good day. Well, we've had a conference for the CAMCA, which not everybody knows is a world region that stands for Central Asia, Mongolia, Caucasus, and Afghanistan, which has been something that the Central Asia Caucasus Institute at AFPC has been doing for now over 10 years. This conference brings together some of the brightest young minds of the region and interested outsiders like ourselves. And the focus this year has been very much, of course, on the pandemic and its effect on this region, which I think everybody will agree it is very early to tell what the consequences are going to be. A certain number of things can already be said. The first is that the pandemic has hit the CAMCA countries very differently. On the whole, however, the region has been hit relatively mildly, definitely compared to the United States and Europe. We could debate the reasons for that, whether that's because of luck, because whether it's a function of their relatively limited integration into the world economy, or whether they have had good policies. These are all questions that people will discuss for some time. There are differences between the countries, which largely relate to their levels of economic development. Countries like Armenia and Tajikistan have had relatively significant problems, whereas Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan are those that have handled the pandemic itself rather well. There is a public health aspect, of course. There is also, perhaps in the long term, equally or more importantly, the economic aspects and implications, where the economic downturn is almost a deja vu for this region. They were just recovering from the oil price collapse of 2015. As many of our viewers probably know, this is a region that is very dependent on hydrocarbons. Countries like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan are, just like Russia, big exporters of energy. But the thing is that even countries that are not are dependent on the energy importers because they have large migrant worker populations that are either in Russia or in Kazakhstan or elsewhere. And therefore, if oil producing countries are doing badly, the rest of the region is also doing badly. Now, the 2015 crisis was one that led to enormous devaluations of currency everywhere in the region. We saw devaluations of up to 40%. So it was really a serious economic crisis that was a stress test for banks and for the whole financial system in the region. And this is, in a way, perhaps a blessing in disguise, because first, there is already a sort of experience of crisis among decision makers across CAMCA, but there is also there were steps taken to engage in serious reforms in many of the countries to shore up the banking system and to have a more stable financial system, and also to attract foreign direct investment. And several countries had done relatively well in engaging in serious reforms to diversify their economies. Obviously, they were at the starting phase because diversification is something everybody speaks about, but nobody really knows how to do. But because of this, there were serious efforts in Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan primarily, and also in Kazakhstan, to make the economies more transparent, to get rid of some of the monopolies in the economy that existed and prevented competition, and also in making making the systems of export, import, trading, tax paying less affected by corruption. Now, this probably means that 2020 has not been quite as bad a shock as it would have been if it hadn't been for this earlier crisis and the lessons learned from that crisis. Now, in the region itself, I think there are certain lessons that can be drawn. The region is subject to the interest of great powers and also to the pet regional institutions promoted by these great powers, primarily Russia, with its Eurasian Economic Union. But I think what one of the lessons the countries are drawing is that the great powers are not necessarily very helpful when it comes to handling domestic crises. The great powers talk their talk, but they don't necessarily offer any support to countries that they want to see as part of their institutions when push comes to shove. The scholar Edward Luttwak has called great powers autistic in this sense, and I think this is a very fitting metaphor, because this crisis has really shown how all great powers really have been focusing on their self-interest and not supporting even the countries they want to draw into their own sphere of influence. Probably I'll stop here, and I'll be glad to discuss any matter further that you'd like to raise.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Svante.
Thank you.
We've posted all the panels from the CAMCA conference on our website. We can also find them at the Rumsfeld Foundation's Facebook page. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Absolutely.
All right.
Take care.
You too.